Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. I am working with new equipment I got yesterday, so please put in the comments if something sounds off or looks off. But I think I have it set up okay. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Tonight I have a candidate, Regina Williams-Preston. She is running in South Bend, Indiana for mayor, which Pete Buttigieg, I
Pretty good.
think.
Sure.
He that is his position, that he is not running for re-election for, since he is now running for the presidency. So thank you so much for joining us, Regina.
Thank you for having me.
I loved everything I saw while researching you. You're
Fantastic.
an activist. You're a school teacher.
I am
You were
now.
a Bernie delegate.
Yep.
That's awesome.
It has been awesome. Fantastic to just really be a part of this movement and really feeling like we're getting some things done. That's what's really exciting about it.
Well, speaking of getting things done, let me pull up my screenshot, because even though you are not elected mayor as of yet, you have accomplished serious things. I mean, you
Yeah.
have an entire list on your website.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. Okay. It says, recently, you've pushed for and passed a new city home repair program to
Right.
help people afford to stay in their homes. You passed an amendment requiring that businesses pay their workers at least 10.10 an hour to get city tax breaks. You supported zoning for a clinic providing safe and affordable women's reproductive health care. You
Absolutely.
protested alongside Honeywell workers and retirees to demand that Honeywell keep the promises they made for retirement medical benefits.
Right. Right. And that's just recently, as we said.
Right.
I really come from an activist background. I have the heart of an activist, and it's the work I've been doing since I returned to my hometown, and really all over the country, wherever I was. It's about really about justice, making sure that everybody gets what they deserve. They get a fair share, a fair shake in life. And it's just been a passion of mine forever. And I've just had the pleasure of being elected 3.5 years ago to serve on the Common Council. It wasn't something I really aspired to do, but having been an activist, you know how we are. We're like constantly pounding on the door, trying to get in, right? So it was an opportunity that came, and it's like, well, what if we were on the inside, like unlocking the door and opening it so we can make things happen? And that's been really, really effective. So I'm excited to say all of the great things we've done. Of course, it's not all just me. It's been done with the community, with local activists. And when we come together, we found that we can really accomplish so much.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I noticed on your website and also on your post, you do talk about the area and housing a lot. And, I've read a lot of articles recently that state that Mayor Pete is not the best, in respect to that. He's actually been accused of gentrification by multiple sources. What is it like in South Bend now? Do you agree with that assessment, and do you think that that's going to be a really huge hurdle?
Well, I think it is, and not just for South Bend, but for cities all over the country, large and small. And South Bend, we only have 102,000 so people, but we have all of the same challenges as any of the larger cities. And with respect to this issue of gentrification, it's happening everywhere. And like I said, I got caught up in it, and that's actually what brought me to politics. I used to be the okay, well, I do my civic duty and I go vote when it's a presidential election. And then when this happened to me, all of a sudden I started getting all these fines and fees, and I had to find out what in the world is going on. And so, just taking a look downtown, it became very clear that city government does not work for the people. I mean, there's no help, there's no assistance. And beyond that, some of those policies are really actually punitive. So, that was kind of what launched me into this political sphere to say, we've got to make change. And so, when I talk about the 1,000 Houses in 1,000 Days, I mean, we have to remember that was probably 7, 8 years ago now. And so, we've been pushing and fighting this battle for some time. But remember, this is like not just some nefarious plot by the Buttigieg administration to remove poor people and people of color. What it is more, this is what's happening. This is how economic development is done. And this is what we have pushed this administration to try to help them understand is that, look, we have to find new tools for redevelopment. We have to, if we value diversity and inclusion, that's just not enough. We have to make sure that the policies that we implement actually bring about the impact that matches our values. And so, regardless of whether it was Pete's administration or, if he started this, because he didn't, but still, as city leaders, we have to take responsibility for the policies that we implement. So we're using these same economic development tools that have been used for decades. And what we have to begin to realize is that, 50, 60 years ago, these policies were developed with deliberate and intentional acts in order to separate and marginalize and keep certain people out. And so when we don't have the courage to admit that and to go back and try to do something different, then that's where we fail. So I would say that no, Pete didn't start this, but any leader has a responsibility to make sure we make the change that's necessary to ensure everybody has equal protection under the law.
Absolutely. Awesome answer. I totally agree. When you speak with people and you knock on doors or make phone calls about your campaign, is this one of the things that you hear about most often?
Absolutely. Everybody's heard because it has been in the local media, this idea of home repair, because as you may or may not know, the city of South Bend, we've gotten a lot of attention and a lot of light because of this national kind of focus of Pete moving into running for president. And even along the way, we've had a lot of investment and growth. It's been wonderful. Everybody in the city is excited about our new kind of trajectory. But the truth is that 54% of the people in the city, working people in the city of South Bend, live paycheck to paycheck. They can't survive on a standard household budget for the state of Indiana. And so what that says is that all of this wonderful investment and growth is really only benefiting a very small segment of our community. So when over half of the people in your city are struggling, we have to take a new focus. We're going to continue with the model that we have for growth and investment. But the challenge for the next administration is really beginning to open up opportunity to those 54%, because those are the folks that are providing their tax dollars, and we're investing those tax dollars everywhere else. It's time that they see a return on their investment.
Absolutely. And what made you decide to get in this race specifically? Did you decide before you knew Pete was not going to run again?
No, really. I hadn't really considered it until, actually until the South Bend Tribune ran an article that kind of posted up, I think, 5 or 6 pictures of people who were considering running. And it was interesting because, everybody kind of was taken aback, because in this age of kind of women's empowerment and everything, the front page of our paper had all men running. So that was something that stood out. But more than that, I knew all of these people. We worked together. It's a small community. And I was really looking for somebody that I could support, somebody that I could get behind and say, yes, this is our candidate. Let's make it happen. So I took the time to go and have coffee, kind of interview, each particular candidate. And again, work with all these folks, have much love and respect for them. And, everybody could identify the problems. Pretty much everybody could do that. Most of the candidates could articulate a vision for where we should be. But I didn't find anyone who could really lay out a plan of how to get from A to B. And all of the work that I've been doing in the schools, in the community as a common council member. These were things I were already working on. I mean, we've got to bring jobs that pay a living wage. We've got to invest in small business. That becomes, again, the economic development focus has to go to the working people now. We have to improve education in South Bend. We have failing schools. The disproportionate suspensions and academic outcomes are off the chain. We just don't educate children of color well. And that's been going on for 20 years or more. We have to reduce violence. All of these things have already been front and center in the work that we've done as activists in this community. So it's really exciting to me. I felt like, there's something that I can offer. There's something that I can bring. And it's really about bringing the community into city government in a way that informs policy so that we're more responsive to the real needs of the people.
Absolutely. And I can only fathom the things you hear from your students about the troubles they're having at home monetarily or what have you. And also I'm sure you do see how the education is split between, children of color. I can't even fathom.
Right.
So as mhm.
A lot of the work that I did before I got into neighborhoods, of course, being a teacher, having been a teacher for 20 years, was around this issue of school to prison pipeline. In South Bend, the numbers are off the charts. I really literally get calls from people all over the country when they just look at national data on school to prison pipeline. And it's very easy to see that South Bend is an outlier in the number of suspensions and expulsions we have in the schools. In fact, one year we were looking at the data and we recognized that, after we kind of calculated everything, African-American students in our district missed 4 million minutes of instruction due to out-of-school suspension. And that doesn't mean anything until you realize that there are only 59,000 minutes of instruction in an entire school year. And by comparison, white students had only missed about a million. Still, that's way too much. And the second largest number in terms of looking at the data as to why students were suspended was attendance. So basically, you skipped class, so we're going to suspend you. So we're just doing things that just absolutely don't make sense. Now, as a mayor, that's really concerning. One of the conversations I had with our chief of police, because when we send kids home, where are they? Their parents are working. So they're just idle time. And one of the statistics a while ago, our chief was sharing was that, the highest number of crimes is property crimes in South Bend. And they're most frequently happening between the hours of 3 and 6 by children, like 12 to 15 years old. And so what does that tell you? We need to provide some resources and support. We need to invest in our children, give them after school activities. I could go on and on with statistics. One last thing I'll share was also with regards to the school corporation, we have police in schools, school resource officers. Between the city pays half, the school pays half. Together we paid about $1 million to keep police in our schools. And I would always ask, so how much do you think our budget that year spent on after school programming? I'll ask you, Joy, what do you think? Throw out a number.
I'm scared you're going to say zero.
It was zero, not $1 in our actual school budget that year for after school programming. So this is another example of how do we truly begin to live our values as leaders, whether it's the city or whether it's the school corporation, and most specifically, the people in the community, because we have to demand more. We have to demand transparency so we recognize and understand the data that's driving all of these issues. And we have to demand accountability because everybody knows that doesn't make sense, right? Let's spend $1 million on police and $0 on after school programming. And then you're wondering what's wrong with kids. So these are just the common sense type of policy making and really reflection that I will bring to the administration because we have to start seeing, put away the rose-colored glasses around everything that's happening in South Bend. People always ask me about Pete. You have to look beyond the polish and focus on the policy. Focus on that impact. It doesn't matter what your intention was. What matters is how does that impact on the community? One of the really important things we did here, again, I have to give credit to all my organizing buddies. We have the Community Forum for Economic Justice, Indivisible, lots of folks coming together to say, together we have a strong voice. Together we can get the job done. So we've got people who are great at numbers. They get all the data for us. We've got people who can speak out. So putting all the people who can write really well and put things out. So putting all that together, we were able to do some really important things. One of the important things was we demanded that the city actually get the data on disparities by race and by the numbers. Because, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, well, we kind of know that, racial minorities aren't doing so well, but you can't address any problem until you have some baseline numbers. And so the city finally commissioned the Racial Wealth Divide Report, which you may have heard about. And the statistics were honestly even probably worse than I had anticipated. One of the things that stood out most specifically was that African Americans in South Bend live in poverty at twice the rate of African Americans all over the country. So that tells you that there's something special and not in a good way happening for African Americans right here in South Bend. And so I think when we begin to go back and look, like for one example, the 1,000 Houses in 1,000 Days, the data that we found indicated that aggressive code enforcement was really applied in Black and Brown communities and communities where it was predominantly low income. And again, when these are the policies that you're using, these are things that dispossess people of homes in this particular case. And we're wondering why people of color lag behind in their wealth and their liquid assets. It's because of policies like this over time. Families that own homes can pass on generational wealth through that home. But when we take that home or force them out of ownership, that's what's interrupting the cycle of wealth and preventing people of color from increasing their wealth and moving forward in life.
Absolutely. And when you're speaking of the police presence and $1 million being spent, I mean, do they need that? Is there, is it an area that's, well, I know the answer.
All right.
I mean, what's why? What is their thing? Is it because it is, there are people of color? Do you think is that why?
Well, I think it's historical racism, and it's how it manifests today. Yes, there's implicit bias. Yes, there's structural racism. And the way it manifests itself in schools, and particularly where we are now in South Bend, is we have a lot of teachers who are very disconnected from the families of the children that they teach. There's a lot of fear. There are a lot of assumptions. Of course, with the attack on public education, just like all over the place, but especially in Indiana, we have high teacher turnover. So we have a lot of people who are maybe less experienced working with kids, but even the more experienced teachers, that's not really an excuse. So there's this broken relationship and there's broken trust. And so when that's happening in your schools, you've got I don't know how familiar you are with the Indiana state policies around education, but that's really the biggest challenge we face because we have the proliferation of vouchers and charters such that, and you know how that works, right? So the charter schools get to they siphon off the most proficient students. And there's a precipitation of students with greater needs and challenges in the public schools. Then as teachers leave and we have lots of teacher turnover, we have less experienced teachers teaching large classrooms of students with the greatest challenges. And really, that's a powder keg. That's a combination for, just for chaos in the classroom. And so teachers are blaming kids are blaming teachers, families blaming teachers. But the truth is, it's not bad teachers, it's not bad kids, it's a broken system. And so those are the things that as mayor that I'll be able to challenge. Just having this background in public education, I understand the classroom, I understand the dynamics that's happening, and I won't be responsible for the day-to-day culture and climate directly, but my role will be to make sure that we created conditions in which the public schools can thrive. And so one of the things we're starting right now as a common council person, we're starting a commission on education. And what that will be. You know, the landscape of education in South Bend has changed dramatically with all well, now we've got the public schools, but we also have the charters and private schools taking vouchers. And even within the public school, we have academies and magnets. And, you know, there's just such segregation and separation in the programming. Parents really don't know. Teachers don't know all of the different things that go in. So the Commission on Education will actually be a neutral body seated in the government that can bring all of those entities together. Anybody receiving public dollars for educating children in South Bend, we're going to bring to the table. And we're going to create a partnership that ensures we have equity and resources across the districts and between districts. And we're going to have some accountability, because together we're going to make that data public. We're going to hold people to the requirements for special education laws. All of these things will be able to happen when we come together.
Absolutely. And one of the viewers just asked a really, really important question. Since they don't want to fund any kind of after school activities or programs, do the schools have any counselors for the kids?
You know, that's clearly a person that has been in the schools, and that's one of the big problems as well. Again, when we talk about putting our money where our values are, we are actually sharing. Our counselors in South Bend schools spend more time like scheduling testing and doing paperwork than they really have time. Their caseloads are way too big, so they really don't have time to do the things that they were trained to do. Social workers are actually shared between buildings, if you can believe that. So we'll have 2 or 3 school resource officers in every building, but we'll only have a half-time social worker. So again, like, are we doing proactive strategies to support children? And we know that we need to be trauma informed for this whole city. We need to understand adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and we need to be implementing programs that support young people and allow them to thrive. But instead, you know, we're doing more in terms of, I just heard the person who will be taking over as superintendent is saying we need more police in schools because we have to make it safe. So 0 proactive strategies. And, you know, when we talk about this, is not just the schools. The schools, of course, are just a microcosm of what's happening in the community. So the mental health resources are just non-existent, essentially. Children, families, adults cannot find, school psychologists or psychiatrists or, doctors to help with the rampant depression. And when we talk about gun violence, we haven't even talked about, people probably know the statistics, 2/3 of gun violence nationally is due to suicide. So we have to begin addressing these issues because these are things that's underlying what's happening. And I've got a great group of folks that's working on restorative practices. We will be a restorative city in South Bend. We've already had a few schools be able to adopt and become restorative schools, where we're teaching the skills of conflict resolution, of self-regulation, of listening, and building relationships and building community. And that's what's going to happen, not just in the schools, it has to happen out in the community, in the neighborhoods. My approach overall to solving all of these different issues in South Bend is about connecting in authentic relationships with everybody in the neighborhood. We're going to use neighborhood associations as a central organizing principle to connect people on the ground with city government. Because if any problem that you're trying to solve, we can't this is one big lesson I learned as a city council person. You can't make effective policy without connecting, talking with, and truly engaging with the people who your decisions are going to impact the most. Because generally, if somebody's having a problem, they're pretty much an expert on that problem. And usually they have some good ideas on how to solve it. What they're missing is the ability to really connect with the resources necessary. So when we're working in collaboration through neighborhoods with real people on the ground, we can address violence. We're going to be doing circles throughout the community, building supportive relationships. And instead of, when I get frustrated picking up a gun, I'll have somebody I can go to. And I'll learn to kind of regulate those emotions and have a network of support. With education, our long-term vision is we're going to go back to neighborhood schools. All this busing kids all over the place, we don't do it well. And it's way too expensive. And everybody knows that when you're living down the street from the same folks that go to your same school. You can share all kind of resources. You can do homework together. All of those things are really important. So neighborhoods and that kind of real authentic connection with real people is what's going to absolutely transform the city, even with regards to economic development. So your person, I've kind of gone away from the specific question. Yes, that's absolutely the problem. We don't have counselors, or the counselors in schools aren't allowed to do, really available to do the work that they need. And we need to invest in social workers. We need to invest in mental health support and services, not just for kids, but for the teachers as well. Because, you know, we're living in this community, we're experiencing the same amount of trauma. We lose students. When students are shot and killed, the students are affected, but so are the teachers. So, you know, we have to increase pay for teachers, but I have to tell you, my really good down for the cause teacher friends are now leaving South Bend schools, not for the money, but they're leaving because of the morale is so low. And so it comes a point when you have to really turn your attention, make some new changes, and change the entire culture of the school corporation. And we need to change the culture of this whole community.
So one of the hardest things about doing this show is interviewing candidates that I really wish I could vote for myself. You are awesome. You have to read the comments after we get off the air because people are really hype about you. And just so you guys know, Mark pinned her website a few times in the comments. So I definitely share the show because we want to get her name out there. That you know, your focus really is on you know, humanity and inclusivity, and that's what's so beautiful because we don't really hear that a lot with candidates. It's more I believe this, but you know, as trite as it may sound to some people listening to people, you are, you know, you're representing we the people. Like you're not getting that job unless they vote for you.
That's exactly.
So do you want to touch on why you have that on your platform so much and why you think that's central to this campaign?
Well, because even though I wouldn't consider myself a political animal. I think that's what makes me maybe unique, but also so authentic. Because I'm doing this work, not because I want to be a politician, not because I want status by any means, because it's just not an easy thing. But because I've learned that this is a way we can really make change. If we can really truly engage people and utilize the structures of the political process of city government, we can really do some work. And it's wonderful because now everybody's focused locally. And that is truly what's going to make the difference in this country. If we can organize within our own communities, build those relationships, learn to work together across difference, take the personal out of it to some degree in terms of when we don't agree. We have a good relationship. We can disagree and still work the problems out so that we're working in the best interest of the people. So for me, you know, even when I ran for council, I said, as I was campaigning, I said, look, you know, in 4 years, you will be able to see, feel, touch a difference in your life. And if that doesn't happen, I won't run again, because we need to find somebody who can really be focused on those outcomes and making sure there's an impact that actually makes change in people's lives. And again, you know, what I have, it's not what I believe, it's what I know within my heart, but from my own personal experiences, that each and every person in this community has values, they have gifts, they have talents that we can certainly use in city government in order to help solve all of these problems. You know, we talk about economic development, and, you know, all the candidates now, you know, we've been working in neighborhoods for 10 years. All the candidates now for mayor are like, oh, we have to turn our attention to neighborhoods. And, you know, when you ask about what that means, you know, they say, oh, we're going to have streets and sidewalks and curbs and lighting. And you know what? That's great. But working in neighborhoods for the last 10 years, what I know is there's so much more. It's more than just building buildings. It's about building people. And when you do that, you create self-sufficiency. And that's the key to sustainability, because the city government doesn't have unlimited resources. We can't go in and fix everything with some dollars. But once we empower people to be able to learn skills, build relationships, they can begin to solve some of their own issues and their own problems. So it's just a way of leveraging relationships and dollars in order to be of benefit to all people. So for a really good example is my plan for economic development and increasing jobs. So generally we, try to entice businesses to come, and we give them tax breaks to do that. And that's an important tool, and it can be used well, and we can ensure community benefit for that. But what progressive cities all over the country are doing in Cleveland and Rochester, New York, they're looking to what they call anchor institutions. Are you familiar with this model, Joy?
I've heard of it, if you want to
Right,
just expand.
sure. So quickly, anchor institutions are large companies, and it's usually nonprofit organizations that are already in your community. So hospitals, universities, not every city has them, but South Bend is blessed with many. And these are large institutions that are spending money, billions of dollars every year on goods and services, which largely go outside of our community. And so there's two ways that we can actually tap into these anchor institutions, and using again the leverage and the relationships in the office, the mayor's office, to invite them to be good corporate citizens and say, okay, well, you know what? Let's look at your supply chain and let's see how we can begin investing in small businesses so we can capture some of those billions of dollars and funnel them back into our community. Now, again, back to the neighborhoods concept. I live like 8 blocks from my mom. So clearly, I'm going up and down that street 80 million times a day. And on my way in those 8 blocks, there's a guy who does large appliance repair in his backyard. Down the street a little bit more, gentleman will do the best detail on your car right in his driveway. You got the shade tree mechanic. You've got the woman selling tamales out of her house. We got a candy store. This is like an underground economy that's happening. And these are very talented people, people with ingenuity, people with dreams and promise. What they're missing is simply the social capital in order to connect with the resources they need to move their business from the backyard to a storefront. And if we can connect with those individuals and help them engage in the mainstream economy, we all win. And they can actually begin to build wealth with their own businesses, and that in itself will transform our community. So there's a gentleman who runs a business distributing paper products. If we go to one of our anchor institutions, Mayoral Hospital, begin and just say, hey, give us just 10%, 10% of your supplies, what you're already going to spend anyway, and just pledge that to this business. That's not anything to that hospital, but it will completely transform that small business. He'll be able to grow. He'll be able to hire more people in the neighborhood who actually can be paid a living wage. And again, once you do that over and over and over again, it stimulates the economy within the neighborhoods and transforms that whole community. The Cleveland model that I was talking about, what they did was even a larger scale. They tapped those institutions and said, okay, well, example, everybody uses commercial laundry. So what they did was they actually worked with Community Foundation, different partners, to build a multi-million-dollar facility right in the middle of the most depressed neighborhood. Then they figured out how to legally draw a circle, nice radius, right around that business and hire people from that community to be worker owners. So it was a worker-owned cooperative. And so those folks were given coaching in order to grow that business. But one of the things that is the hardest thing for a business is their clients. But that was the thing they didn't have to worry about, because with 10% of the business from all the anchor institutions pledged for 10 years, all they had to do is work on making the most successful business that they could. And so it begins a positive feedback cycle. Those folks who own that business now, they're not just paying themselves well, but they're building wealth, because now they actually own a multi-million-dollar business. And it, again, another opportunity to transform that entire neighborhood. So with a neighborhood focus, with a real focus on connecting and relating across difference and engaging regular people, that 54% that's struggling right now, giving them the access to resources that the city has to offer, that's how South Bend will be a model city for America.
Absolutely. That is awesome. Oh my gosh. What I have some people asking about a federal job guarantee. Now that's something that obviously you couldn't do as a mayor, but is
Mhm.
that something you support?
Well, tell me more about that. Federal job guarantee, meaning
Bernie
not like
actually put that on
responsibility.
his
Okay.
platform.
Hmm.
Basically, what it is the federal government would guarantee a job to anyone who wants one.
Hmm.
Meaning, with that, we could do so much with green infrastructure,
Hmm.
people who run nonprofits, people who run charities, everything they do would give them the like 15 an hour, plus they'd be making an income on what they're doing anyway. So
Hmm.
like activism, things like that. And basically, it's an incentive for people to work, but not just that, to actually be able to
Enjoy.
work and do what they love.
Right.
It would be great for entrepreneurs, things
Mhm.
like that. And it's been successful in other places.
Right.
So basically, it cuts out like unemployment.
Right. Right.
It gives
100%.
gets homeless people off the street.
Mhm.
It helps with depression.
Right. Right.
It helps. I mean, it's basically cyclical with everything. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, that's something that would definitely change our country, hands down.
Right.
So definitely look more into that. I
I
mean,
will
like I
for
said,
sure. I think that,
it's
yeah.
not something like you could, control per se,
Right.
but I definitely think you should look into it because it would help so much with what you're saying with with counselors or with after school programs. I mean, we'd be able to hire those people so we
Right.
could get them in,
Right.
and we wouldn't have to pay for them. The government
Mhm.
would.
Right. Well, I think that that makes a lot of sense. I can't wait to look into that more and, see how we can be maybe a prototype for that. Let's see how that works and can
Yeah.
work right here in South Bend. And let's show that it works. Makes all the sense of the world. It's kind of like what I would hope we'd be able to get at with connecting with people in neighborhoods. Just simply being able to say, hey, what is it that you need? What's your greatest dream? How can we help you get there?
Absolutely. um So I wanted to mention too, before I forget, Eric Held just reminded me, in this mayoral race, 154 years it's been
That's
of white men
right.
with this position.
Right.
So what would it mean, not just for yourself to win this, but also as a woman and a woman of color to break that 154 years of just white men?
That's right. Well, the really exciting thing is we have a candidate who will not just break barriers around being the first African American, but also the first woman. But she also happens to be the most qualified candidate. And yes, that's me. So it's something that, has really, we're kicking the door down, I think, ever since. Well, I don't know if it didn't necessarily start in 2016, but I think there was a fire in someone, all of our, in our soul to make sure that women are represented in leadership. And for me, actually, you might have seen the press conference by Muffet McGraw. She said it so well in terms of the benefits of having women in leadership, because our young women need role models to look up to. They need to see that it's possible, that it can happen, and that even still today, 2019, we have a disproportionate representation of male leadership. And the importance of women style, like our leadership style, I think is what is needed and to move us through some of these issues today. I think Fareed Zakaria did something recently on women's leadership, and it really rang true that typically, men are more like kind of territorial, and they have more of a conflict style an approach to dealing with things. And women, on the other hand, are much more collaborative and bringing everybody to the table. So it doesn't mean men will be left out or our sons or young men. It just means it opens again the opportunity to the other gender, to women to step up. And part of my decision in getting in this race, I realized internalized oppression. I understand how women, we often are, we're taught to be in the supportive role, to get behind, what's that thing they used to say? Behind every successful man is a strong woman. Well,
Right, right.
we don't have to be behind anymore. And that was the thing. It's like, I think I even had a lot of people saying, well, why don't you support this person? Why don't you just, step down and get behind this person? And, but I recognize that. I recognize that as oppression. I mean, that's what we do. Women and people of color, we play the support role. We have the vision, we have the ideas, and we kind of support white men in moving those things forward. And we don't have to do that anymore. That was really a big step for us. It's like, for me and getting in this race, we can play the leadership role. Black women can lead, and it's time that we get in the front and get that done.
Absolutely. And I see a few comments for Nina Turner for VP. If you
Yes.
guys go if you guys go to my Facebook and Twitter pages, you will see I met Miss Nina for the 4th time on Sunday, and I confronted her and I said, look, I don't know if you're going to respond to this, but I am Burn and Turn 2020. Let Bernie know that's how we feel.
All
You
right.
are our VP. Like,
That's
just
right.
let them know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of a super fan of Miss Turner for sure.
Oh man, she is fire. So you were a Bernie delegate.
Yeah.
Are you going to have you made an endorsement of a 2020 candidate?
I haven't yet, but my heart is with Bernie. I think we have some unfinished business there, and so I'm really excited. That's one of the big things. People always ask me because my current mayor, is running for president. But it's going to be a hard sell for me for someone to say this is not the way to go. Because just because it didn't happen 4 years ago doesn't mean it can't happen now, and it needs to happen maybe even more. We've got
I
to have a
agree.
true progressive leader to be at the helm so we can move this thing forward and get the job done.
Absolutely. And today, I don't know if you saw the news, but 7 prominent African Americans endorsed Bernie in South Carolina.
I didn't see
7.
that. Oh man, I've been out all day running around in meetings and such. That is fantastic. All right.
Yeah, it's huge, huge. Oh my God, so exciting. Um, so thank you so much for joining us. You are
Good.
just awesome.
I
Um,
appreciate it.
can you give your website? It's in the comments, but can you just give your website, your Twitter, your Facebook, and what you need if you need donations or canvassers or phone bankers or
So, it's done. You're saying all the right things. Check me out at www.rwpformayor.com. We're in need of donations. That's how things get done. One way or another. We're fighting that fight. We're fighting big money. We're fighting, the establishment, and anyone can help. We're doing a final push in this last few, 18, 17 days now. And we're going to just be hitting doors like crazy. We're going to put teams of people on the street. So if you're in South Bend, or if you want to come to South Bend, we can put you up. But let's hit the doors and make sure everybody gets the message about Regina Williams-Preston for mayor. We're for the 54%. We're for the working people of South Bend.
awesome. I see a few phone banker volunteers in the comments. This is
Awesome.
awesome. So thank you once more for joining us. You guys, thank you so much for watching. If you guys know anyone in South Bend, please send them this interview, send the website, anything like that, because we need to get this woman elected. She's going to make some changes for sure. She already has. So yeah, definitely. So tomorrow I have 2 ridiculous shows. I have Lee Camp coming on at 5:30, which is just bananas. And then at 9 o'clock, I have Mike from the Humanist Report back. So tomorrow is just going to be like, I'm just going to fangirl all over the place. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, once more, thank you so much, Regina, and best of luck, everyone watching. It's May 7th. That is the day to vote.
That's right. Let's get it done.
All right. Awesome. Everybody have a good night.
Good night.
Take care.